All right, looks like we've started recording. So, welcome everyone. Today we are going to be learning about Microsoft Power BI, which is an analytics tool that we can use to help us gain insight from all the data that we generate and all the data that we encounter throughout our organization and our workplace. So the first step to accessing Power BI is going to be going to office.com. And in office.com, you can look for all of your apps. So you may look at the left-hand app rail right here, and if all apps aren't showing, you can click on the Show All Apps button right here. Alternatively, if this is what your homepage looks like, if you're already seeing all your apps, you can just navigate to Power BI. I will note that my page may look a little different from everyone else's. This is a demo environment, so I just have access to a lot of things so that I can demonstrate them if need be. But
Is someone
regardless,
talking?
yes. Um,
Yes, we do have a a presenter that has started. Are you unable to hear?
um,
If
Devin, if
you
you
are
want,
unable to hear, please go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll be able to help you on the side.
yeah, you may
Thank you
want to
very
address
much.
that in the chat, Devin, just because it sounds like maybe they can't hear anyone. Um, in any case, let's move on forward. So we're going to find Power BI here in office.com, and this is the primary place we'll be going to view reports in Power BI and really access all the content that Power BI has to offer for us. I do want to note that there is also a Power BI desktop app. The Power BI desktop app is where you'll go to author reports. Now that is relatively advanced and it's going to be beyond the scope of today's training, but just know that the Power BI desktop app is there for you for authoring reports, and actually it's also free to access. So it's the part of Power BI that is a part of your licensing is going to be where you upload it to the cloud so that other users can access it. So if you don't want to access Power BI, you can find the Power BI desktop app and use that. We're going to go into our web app, which is also called Power BI Service, and let's take a look at our homepage. So this is our launchpad for everything that we do in Microsoft Power BI. You'll see on the left-hand side, we have a navigation panel where we'll see that we are currently on our homepage. We also are able to add various content that we see throughout Power BI to our favorites. Now, this is, again, an empty demo, so we don't actually have anything in our favorites. Likewise, I don't have anything in my recents except for my workspace, but you can access both of those here using this navigation panel. When we want to go and create new things in Power BI, we can go to our Create section right here, and we'll be asked to choose between manually pasting data or picking an existing published data set. And again, that's where that desktop app comes in. That's if you are not pasting in data or manually entering it in, setting up setting up data connections and uploading them, it's going to be in the purview of that desktop app. If we want to view the data sets that we have access to, we can go to our data sets. And then um, the, the other thing I want to touch on is that we do have this wonderful Learn section right here that has um, that has a bunch of resources for us. Now we're going to step into our first report, and we're actually going to use this section right here. So we're going to use this sample report, this opportunity analysis sample right here. So if anyone is following along, you can do so and just follow along with what we're doing. I'll click on this and open it up. It'll take a moment to load this demo. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this navigation panel. And this is our first look at a Power BI report. So this is our view as what's called a consumer of the report, as someone who's looking at and reading the report, not editing it. But as we'll see, we have a lot of tools for interacting with our data. But first, I want to show everyone around. Along the top, we have kind of a simplified ribbon up here. We can save a copy of our report, download a file, etc. That's only going to be for reports that we have specific access to, so that we own. We can share a report or chat about it in Teams. And then you'll see that we have these ellipses right here where we can do some additional stuff. I will be getting back to that later. I just wanted to call out that some of our options, like going into edit mode and our file options, are up here in this top bar. Along the left-hand side, you will see our pages. Now, a report can be made up of several different pages. Right now, this report just has two. We have our overview page, and we have this detailed page. Now, for most of today's session, we will live in this uh, overview page, but I do want to show that we can have multiple different pages in our reports if we want, and that's important to know as we start thinking about authoring our own reports. Now, in the center of the screen, oh, actually, also, by the way, in terms of pages, we do have this little double arrow icon that we can use to collapse that pages menu. I will do that just for the sake of having as much screen space as possible to share with everyone. So let's take a look at what we have here in this report. So in Power BI, part of the way that it provides us with insight and analysis is by helping us visualize our data. So reports are built up of pieces called visualizations and cards. So these are here are cards. They just have like individual pieces of data, numbers, things like that. And then we also have these visuals right here. We have this, which is a tree map. We have a bar graph right here. We have a bar and line graph right here. We have a map, and we also have another bar graph. Um, so visualizations are the primary way we are going to interact with stuff in Power BI. I will note that we can display things in a more kind of tabular format, more like a table, as we can see in this detail page. But coming back to this opportunity overview, I want to show some of the neat stuff that we can do here. So the first thing is that we can interact with our data when we are working in Power BI. For example, if I can select one of these areas, so I can just left click right here, for example, on my East region, and we'll see that it highlights that East region. And not only is it highlighted for the, in the visual that I have selected it in, it also highlights in all my other visuals. So all these visuals are connected. So we'll see that I've selected the East region. And I will note that if I mouse over any kind of piece of data in a visual, it will give me a tooltip, kind of like what we're seeing right here. If I hover over my pipeline by stage, we'll see that I get a similar tooltip with it. We are highlighting the part that belongs in the East region. Now, actually, taking a step back, I do want to talk about this demo right here, this scenario. So this scenario is built on the idea of it being kind of a sales organization that has that sells things to large companies. They have a set of products. When and their salespeople go around, they look for sales leads as they generate, as they find interested customers. If they once they have a lead, they make sure that the lead is qualified to it's an appropriate sale. Then work is done on finding a solution. Then a solution is proposed to the customer, and then something is finalized to be booked as revenue. So we'll see here, if I go to this bar chart down here where I have my pipeline by stage, that's kind of the life cycle of a sale in this demo. And that's only important to understand insofar as it relates to the demo. But we can also, a lot of what we'll see here will apply to other things. So we're worried more about how we use Power BI, how we can interact with it. So don't worry too much about the details of this specific demo. The important thing is that we are, interacting with our data, and that will apply to the reports that you deal with as well. But we'll see here that in this sales organization, so a sales opportunity is kind of the items that we are looking at in this report. We are trying to get insights about the various sales that we have. So our first chart right here is going to be a display of the opportunity count by region. So we have a business that's divided into East, Central, and West regions, and we're able to visualize that, the kind of relative contribution of each of those regions. Now, again, when I mouse over, I get that tooltip showing me an exact number. And likewise, if I mouse over this bar chart down here, we'll be able to see the number of things in our lead stage. And again, there's that kind of life cycle of a sales opportunity. It starts as a lead and so on. Now, when we are interacting with data, so we'll see here, for example, like our regions right here. there can be times that our data is organized as a hierarchy, so that there are kind of categories and then subcategories. When that happens, you'll see some of these arrow icons right here. So whenever we are hovering over or have selected a visual, we will see a series of buttons above the visual that allow us to interact with it. So if we are working with data that's kind of in a hierarchy, and common hierarchies would include things like uh, months and versus a specific date, like a month contains a collection of days, and oftentimes it wouldn't be helpful to look at our opportunity count or our revenue by day. But if we want to be able to zoom into that, or if we want to be able to zoom in by those subcategories, that's what these arrows are for. So our first one turns on our drill down mode. And if I click on any of these with this drill down mode active, we'll see that I go from looking at my East region to filtering everything out. So I'm only looking at the East region now. I'm not looking at all the rest of my data. And I've now kind of zoomed in on these subcategories of states. So each region is composed of states. And if I want to look at metrics state by state, I can drill down and view those subcategories right there by turning on drill down mode. Now I can always drill back up by pressing the drill up button right here. Another option that we have is the option to go to the next level in the hierarchy. This is different from turning on drill down mode because when we drill down, we are kind of filtering our view to just look at one of these regions. Whereas if I go to the next level in the hierarchy, it's not going to select just one region. It's going to go to the next level in the hierarchy for all of these. So we'll see go to the next level in the hierarchy right here. And then we have all of our states displayed here. Now that's not super readable, which is one of the reasons why we have this kind of category and subcategory system. It's about making our visuals easier to deal with. After a certain point, if we have a lot of subcategories, visuals like these would have a degree of clutter that makes them unusable. However, we have some additional tools with our visuals. The first I want to highlight is up here in the top right-hand corner next to these three dots is focus mode. If I click on focus mode, this visual will expand to take up my entire screen. So this is one way that we can make these visuals with more information that we've kind of expanded to the lowest level of the hierarchy, so things are more granular. This is one way that we can make those a little bit more readable. So we'll see that I can now view, I can now actually see the text, the name of each state that we're looking at, and it's a little bit clearer. So there can be times that this is desirable, especially if we want to copy and paste it, if we want to share it with other people. So that brings us to our next button right here, which is this copy icon, and we can copy our visual as an image. So we'll prepare an image of this, and once we copy it, I don't know why it's taking quite so long, but there we go. We can hit copy to clipboard, and we can paste it wherever we need to, whether that's an email, whether that's a Teams message, so on, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation. If we want to essentially get a copy of a visual, that's why we have this copy visual button right here, and that can combine with our focus mode to get a really good view of more specific, more granular data. Now I can go back to my report right here, and anytime I want to go back up to a level of my hierarchy, I can again always click drill up right here. However, another thing you'll notice is that as soon as we started making changes, as soon as we started interacting with our report, this little yellow back arrow appears up here in our top bar. So what this will do is this will reset the report to its default state. So any changes that we've made, any kind of navigation through our hierarchies, anything else that we've done, any selections that we've made, this can reset it. So if we want to go back to our default state, this is the button to press. And I'll note that, as soon as we, drill down, again, that button, shows back up for us. The last button I want to highlight is this option to pin our visual. So within Power BI, we work with reports, and then we work with something called dashboards. So what we're looking at right now is a report, and a report is this very in-depth interactive view of our data, where we can do things like click on items to highlight them in other visuals, etc. Now, in order to bring multiple different reports together in one place, we have a tool called a dashboard. And the way that we build a dashboard is we hover over, we start by hovering over any visual, and we'll see this pin icon, and we can pin the visual to a dashboard. Now, I don't have an existing dashboard, so I have to create a new one right here. But I'll go ahead and just call this my demo dashboard. And let's take a look at that dashboard experience. So I've pinned this to a dashboard, and I'm going to go to that dashboard right here. And we'll see that this visual now appears in my dashboard. Now the dashboard is kind of organized into a little bit of a grid. We'll see when we kind of hover over the lower right-hand corner of a visual that we can click and drag to expand or kind of resize our visual however we want. And additionally, if I were to go back to my original, if I were to go back to this and I were to pin another visual, let's say I were to pin this visual right here. Oops, I want this button. There we are. And we will pin it to this dashboard and go back to the dashboard. We'll see that we can have several different visuals here, and we can rearrange them as we need. Now, the purpose of this is to allow us to get data from multiple different reports all in one place. And it's very much like a car dashboard. It's something that we're supposed to be able to look at a glance, and that will give us those critical metrics. Now, one of the differences between dashboards and reports is that when I go and I click on any visual right here, it won't actually change any of the other visuals in the dashboard. What it will do is it will take me to the report that the visual comes from. So we can think of dashboards as being one way of organizing multiple different reports and giving users the ability to kind of navigate to them, because anytime they want to get a deeper view of any of the visuals in that dashboard, they'll just click on those visuals and it will take them to the report where they can really kind of investigate what's going on. So dashboards exist for that purpose to give us the ability to look at a bunch of different critical metrics at once. Again, like a car dashboard, it's something, we're not staring on and focusing on our dashboard while we're driving our car, but it's something that we glance at. It has some important information that we need to be able to take a peek at once in a while. So, but going back to our report, let's look at the other ways that we can interact with our data. So, like I said, we can click on any elements of my visuals, like any bars in our bar chart, any segment in this tree map, to select or to rather highlight those components in our other visuals. So we'll see that it kind of fades out the part that isn't contributed by our east region in all these other graphs. Now, something to note is that if we want to select multiple things to highlight, we do have that option. By default, if I'm just left clicking, we'll see that if I click central and left click, it will just change my view to central. If I want to add to my existing selection, the way that I do that is I hold control on my keypad and I left click. So we'll see that control plus left click means that we are kind of adding to our existing selection that we're highlighting. So this allows us to select multiple things if that's something that we want to do. This will also come up when we look at our product codes over here, but whenever we want to select multiple things, always think control and left click. Now, actually one last thing that I want to show is this filter icon right here that will appear above all of our visuals that when we are working with them. And this isn't actually a button that does something. This is instead a thing we can hover over that'll tell us something about our visual. So we can apply filters throughout our visuals. For example, if I have drill down mode on and I click the east region, all of a sudden I'm filtering out everything except things in the east region. So if I look in this pipeline by stage area and I hover over this filters icon, it'll tell me what filters are being applied. This is important because we never want to be under any mistaken assumptions about what sort of data we're looking at. I don't want to be looking at some data and be operating under the assumption that this is the data from my entire business when it's actually the data from my from a specific subset. So if we're ever unclear, and this is not something that we need to be super concerned with, but if we ever kind of lose track of the filters that we've applied, if we ever need to figure out exactly what we are viewing and kind of understand what's going on, this filter button or this filter icon is our friend. It'll tell us essentially exactly what data we are viewing. We're saying we're only viewing the data where the region is our east region. Another neat thing that we can do, and this is not going to be for all visuals, but and it will have to be enabled by the report creator, but provided the report creator and allows this, you'll see that some visuals will have this personalized visual button, like we do here for this bar chart. Now, personalized visual is a really interesting tool that really blurs the line between kind of consuming data from a report and authoring a report ourselves. If I go to personalize this visual, I'll be given options and I can actually change the setup of this visual in really key ways. One thing I can do is I can change the type of visualization. So if I find that this type of visualization is not helpful for me, I can go in here and I can choose from a bunch of other options. So right now I have a stacked bar chart. I can choose from some other options here. For example, I might choose a funnel chart. Now we'll see that I get different options depending on what visualization type I'm looking at. So we'll see that when I have the visualization type of funnel, my two areas where I can add things are this group and my values. Whereas if I go back to that stacked bar chart, we'll see that we have an axis, a legend, and then values, as well as some extra options right there. But I want to highlight what's going on here, and we'll get more into this when we start building our own report. But the way that Power BI works at a very fundamental level is it takes in large amounts of data. It takes in, it takes in what I like to call piles of data. It's, there's a lot of information, but it's not especially organized. There's a lot of it to deal with. And as, humans, we have a finite capacity for kind of taking it all in at once. So what Power BI does is it takes those piles of data and it organizes them into groups or categories or some way of kind of dividing things up into multiple separate sets. And then it tries to give us some sort of number, some sort of metric for each of those sets. And that is our values. So no matter what visual type we are looking at, we will always have this values field, and that's going to be essentially the number that we use to summarize a given set. For example, right here, when we're looking at pipeline by stage, this is the number of items. So we have the count of opportunities, the count of sales opportunities right here. So the metric here is, we're grouping things into separate groups based on what stage they are in this sales life cycle. And then we're counting up how many there are in each of those groups. And that is our, that is our metric. That is what we are using to summarize this information. Now, what's powerful, what is useful about Power BI is that, we're very dynamic in terms of how we can do this. We can filter, we can do a bunch of stuff to interact with this. So it's not at all a static view, but that's fundamentally what's going on. So we'll see here that with a bar chart, the way that we group things together is actually called our axis. Whereas, so we'll see that our axis is sales stage right there. Whereas if I change my visualization type to a funnel, for example, we'll see that it's called group. There will be different names for this idea in certain different visuals, but the thing to understand is this is how we're breaking down our large pile of data into smaller sets, into smaller chunks. So no matter whether it's called our group, whether it's called a category, whether it's called an axis, no matter what, there will be some way that we are setting things up to be divvied out into various chunks. And we'll have our values where we will generate some summary for things into that chunk. And this is our first look at this. But for now, we'll see that I can change my visualization type to a funnel. And one thing I might want to do, for example, is rather than look at the number of opportunities, for my values, I might want to change it out. And we'll see that I'm given a whole bunch of data to pick from. So this can be a little intimidating. And definitely working with this and getting the most out of this requires some familiarity with your base data set. So it requires some understanding, right, of that. But one thing that we might want is we might want to view the revenue as a funnel rather than the number of opportunities. I care more about the overall dollar value of things than I do about how many things there are. So we'll see here that I've personalized this visual. Anytime I want to revert those personalizations, I can click on this little eraser icon, Or when I'm done personalizing it, I can hit this little X. One sec. And it was just prompting me to do what I was about to show you what to do. So anytime we personalize a visual, obviously that's a non-zero amount of effort. That might take some time to really determine what we want to change, and what we're looking at. So typically, we don't want to have to do that over and over again. I don't want to have to do this every time I load this report up. So we have the ability to bookmark different views in our reports, and that's going to be this bookmark icon right next to my reset icon. So I'll click on bookmarks right here, and I can click add a personal bookmark. And I might just call this my East Region revenue funnel. And I can even choose to make this the default view, so that and that's not going to be the default view for anyone else, that's just going to be for me. But I can make this the default view for me, so that whenever I load this report up, all these selections, so the selection of the East region right here, and also the change to my visual right here, all of those are loaded by default. So I can, I'm not going to do that, but I can hit save right here. And again, that option exists if we want to use that. And we'll see that even if I reset these filters, if I reset all the personalizations that I've made, I'll be able to go back here to my bookmarks. And if I click on this bookmark right here, again, it just takes me back to that existing state. So anytime I'm working, if I have filters or sets of changes that I've made that I do frequently, let's say that I'm a manager in this East region, and I really only care about the region that I manage. I don't care about other people's regions. These are some filters that I would apply normally. Just bookmark it, and you will have access to that on a consistent basis. Now I'm going to reset this back, and let's look at some other things that we can do within this report to interact with our data. So everything we've shown so far has been about kind of diving deeper into a complex data set. But Power BI can also help us identify reasons for changes in our data. For example, you'll see that we have this revenue and opportunity count by month, where we have this opportunity count as a little line and revenue as a bar chart. Now you'll notice that I have some big increases and decreases over time. For example, we have a huge drop off from June to July. Now, I can right click anywhere in this, or on any bar at least in this chart, and we'll see that in my right click menu, I have this analyze button. Now, depending on what sort of things are there in the chart, we will get different prompts. For example, this was a big decrease month over month. So we went from June being this revenue to July being this, and Power BI notices that's a big change. So we get this prompt to explain the decrease. So if I go to explain the decrease right here, Power BI is going to crunch some numbers and try and find factors that correlate with that decrease. So, what parts of our business were doing, better or worse. And I understand for DVA, it's not a business per se, but it's, we can look at changes more generally. We want to think, throughout this demo, we do want to think about this as more of an example of how we interact with Power BI rather than these being the specific things you'll be doing. But anytime there's a big change in one of these charts, it'll look at the other pieces of data that might correlate with this. So again, in this example, looking at the big change in revenue, we'll see that West Virginia had an increase and all these other states had a decrease, and we get this handy little waterfall chart showing that. And we get some information about which changed the most. We get some info about the sales channel that is used here, and where, what accounts for the big decrease. If we look here, we can look at different segments of business, for example. So there are all these other pieces of data associated with our data set that aren't shown in a visual, but this can help us find which of those correlates if we are ever confused as to, why was there a big change? So Power BI can give those suggestions to us so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on. And it's not always going to be perfect, but it can be a good place to start brainstorming. It can be a good place to start getting an understanding of what's going on. Now, I do want to highlight again that it is context sensitive what it does. So we'll see here if I go to December and I right click and go to analyze, it'll instead ask to explain the increase rather than decrease. Um, so it is going to be context sensitive, but we can use that to essentially find suggestions from Power BI as to, explanations for why things are happening the way they are. Now, next, I want to draw everyone's attention to this product code area right here. And this is our first view of what is called a slicer. So this is one way that we have of filtering out data. And just again, for reference in this example, this is a company that sells products. We have code names for all the products. And if I want to view the performance of individual products, I could use this slicer to filter things out and only select what I want to see. For example, I could look at this Quanti product right here, and then I would only be looking at the data for that product. Now, if I want to select multiple things, I can again control and left click. So let's say I want Quanti and Umbra and Maximus. Again, all these are just kind of fictional code names for our products. But if I want to just filter things out there, I do have that option to select multiple. And again, anytime we make selections like this, we'll see that we can see the filters affecting it by hovering over any visual, hovering over this filters icon, and we can see that, what filters are affecting this right here. Now, anytime we want to clear any filters that we've made, we'll see that above my slicer here, we have this clear selections button. So we can reset things there. We can also, if we've applied any customizations, we can hit that full reset right there as well. Now, another tool, and I will say, so slicers are available, but they have to be built into the report. A lot of these features, a lot of what we are seeing is kind of in the hands of the report builder to provide to you. But we do want you to be able to use these appropriately, when these tools are provided to you. So the other one I want to show is that, and this is a really neat one, is this little speech bubble right here, which is our ability to ask Power BI a question. And this is pretty neat. Now, with Power BI, we do have the ability to kind of do what's called natural language processing, which means it can understand things that we ask of it in English. So, what are the top 3 states by revenue? We can see it kind of generates that graph for us by revenue. There we go. I could also ask, what are, is the average revenue per opportunity? So we can ask these sort of things about our data, and Power BI will identify these keywords for us, and it will try and find a visualization for us that will match. We can even specify what type of visualization it is. For example, I could ask for revenue by month as a column chart. Bar chart is what is bar chart what I want. Just there we go. Yeah, bar chart. So we can specify exactly what sort of visualization that we want as well in this. So these are all tools for allowing us to essentially answer questions that we have about our data without having to go to our report authors and without having to go to essentially ask for assistance from other people. And while it is good to have a team that you can rely on, really the focus on this idea of self-service analytics is about reducing the turnaround time between asking a question and getting the answer so that you can make your decisions. So that's kind of philosophically the ideas behind this is that when you can find answers to your own question, it shortens that decision-making loop quite a bit. Now, the last thing I want to touch on here in this report is this map right here. So one thing that we'll see is when I hover over any part of this map, I get a custom tooltip. Custom tooltips are another thing that can be built into reports. But we'll see that rather than having our things like we have right here, where we just have a count of the number of opportunities and kind of a description there, we instead get this more detailed visual tooltip right there. But we'll see above here that I have this option to select a state below to enable drill through. So what is drill through? Well, drill through is an ability to allow us to apply filters on one page and then move to a different page with those same filters applied. Now, I want to remind you that we have this details page right here. And if I go to that, there's quite a lot going on here. There's quite a lot of information. And if I want to get more out of this, one way that I can do that is I can filter it down so I make sure that it's, we're looking at what's relevant to what I am looking for. So we have this. So once I select a state, we will see this option to drill through to detail. And if I drill through, we'll see that it moves me to this details page, but it has all these filters that are applied for my other sheet. So this is one way that sheets can be kind of, or rather that pages can be connected, and we can use this kind of friendly, more visual overview page to help make this more data-heavy page more manageable for us. And then whenever we are done, we can hit this little back arrow to go back to our original visual. Now, I do want to pause here briefly just to address any questions that have come up about what we've gone over so far. Our next step is going to be building out some visuals and some reports ourselves. But if there's any questions right now about the content we've covered so far, I would be happy to answer them.
Haven't had any direct questions come up oh, it seems like we did have one that just came through. What class should I take that helps ensure that the reports I build optimize the ability for the visualizations within Power BI? I will actually go ahead and handle that one offline. But I think we're good on Q&A. I think we're okay to continue.
Okay, awesome. In that case, we're going to go ahead and we are going to close this out, and we are going to look at what it's like to build our own report. Now, again, I will note that a more robust report creation experience is available in the desktop app, but we can still create reports in the Power BI service. So if I go to my create area right here, the main difference between the desktop app and the Power BI service is typically we are relying on a data set that has already been published. So if we are building a report from scratch and that kind of connects to data that we don't have an existing data set for, that is where that Power BI desktop tool will come in. However, one of the benefits of this way of doing it is that once we get a data set put together, people can put together visuals really. People can put together reporting based on that data set in a fairly straightforward way, so that we don't need to have everyone connecting to databases and going through all that, because while Power BI is a really sophisticated tool for that, that is complicated and a bit. I don't have any data sets yet. Yes, I do. I've been using a data set in my report. Sorry, Power BI is giving me a little bit of sass. 1 second. Actually, this is a good opportunity to segue into how things are stored in Power BI. So in Power BI, specifically in the Power BI service, rather than having files that are stored in folders, we have data sets, reports, and dashboards that are stored in workspaces. So everyone is going to have this My Workspace, which is the area for you to work on things. And then you may see additional workspaces. Now, your organization is going to govern who is allowed to create new workspaces. So if you don't see this button, it could be that there are procedures within your organization to go through to set up workspaces. But you can have workspaces associated with like Teams and Microsoft Teams, etc. And workspaces are a way of governing access to resources in Power BI. Because when something's in a rather than having to grant access to individual reports one at a time, we can grant access to a workspace, and then people will be able to view everything in that workspace. But we'll see here that in my workspace, I have this demo dashboard that I created. I have a report. So this is our little report icon. And we have our data set, which is our data set icon. So usually it should let me create and use this data set. Don't know why it hasn't quite updated that yet. In any case, another way that we can go to create things is next to any item here, we'll see that we have these ellipses to give us more options. And when we click on a data set, I can hit create report. I can create a report based on that data set. Now, this is our editing view, and it's considerably more busy than our kind of report consumption view. And that's appropriate as we are working with some different stuff now. So I want to highlight that we have, again, kind of some ribbon options along the top. And we have these three panels. We have filters, visualizations, and fields. Now I'm going to put filters on the back burner for now. I am just going to show, so I'm going to collapse that right here. We will return to that shortly. But for now, I want to focus on fields and visualizations. So visualizations are, again, the sort of visuals we were working with earlier, and this is where we go to create them. We have a couple different ways that we can create them. We can either, if we have nothing selected in the report, like if it's just blank like this, I can click on a visualization like this to create a blank visual. For example, I could click on my column chart right here, and it would create a blank column chart. Now I'll note that if I have a visual selected like this, and I click on another visualization type, rather than creating a new visualization of that type, it is going to change the type of this existing visualization. You see here where it's, it's kind of highlighting the stacked bar chart. Oops, it's highlighting the stacked bar chart right there. If I click on this, rather than if I click on, for example, the pie chart, rather than creating a new pie chart on my screen, it's going to change this existing visual that I have selected to be a pie chart. So there's something to be careful of right there. The other way that we can create a visual is by going to our fields. And let's say I wanted to create a visual that had information about my revenue. I could click and drag revenue right over here to my screen, and that would create a visual right here, and we can go and change the type as we need. And with that, that's kind of an introduction to our fields. Let's talk about what fields are. Fields are pieces of information from our data set, and they're how we set up visualizations. So fields are going to be information like dates or months, as well as revenue, things like that. And we use these fields to populate the various parts of our visualization. And that will ultimately control what the visualization shows and what it looks like. So I want to point out that below this visualizations palette, I have this fields area. So it's actually organized into a couple of different tabs. So there's a fields and a formatting area. But in this fields area, this is where we get to plug in the data that we want broken down by Power BI. So let me clear this out. For example, if I wanted to just do a simple revenue by month chart, so we see that in my values, revenue is in my values. And again, that's what we want. Remember that with Power BI, we are breaking things down into categories and then generating some metric for all the things in those categories. And we'll see in this case, how do I want to break things down? Well, I'm looking for revenue by month, so I want to break things down by month. So I'll click and drag month over here. And we will see that now that's all I had to do to get a visual of revenue by month is I have my values here under revenue. And I have my axis being month right here. And then Power BI, now that we have a metric and some way that we are grouping our data together, Power BI does the rest for us. Now, I do want to talk also about setting up hierarchies. One thing that we can do if we wanted to set up hierarchies is we can actually drag multiple fields to our groups. So let's say I wanted to do, we have a year? Yeah, we have year. Now, there's only going to be 1 year involved. This only covers 1 year of data. But if I click and drag year over here and I place it above on my my axis, so essentially the order is, kind of highest to lowest in the hierarchy. We'll see that I get only one bar, only one column here, but now I have these drill down and expand, go to the next level in the hierarchy buttons. So this is how we set up hierarchies, is we just have multiple related fields in our in our grouping, and I can click on drill down right here. And if I drill down, it'll then break things down by month. So setting up hierarchies like we saw earlier is as simple as just dragging the individual criteria for our hierarchy, our individual sorry, our fields that we want to work with over here, and then we just in the order that we want. Sorry, I had a bit of a brain blank there. But when we are so when we're working in Power BI, that's one thing that we have going for us is that it's in this report creation screen. It's not well, I do want to be careful that and make sure that we're choosing the right groupings to get us something that we can actually gain insight from. The actual process of setting it up, once we know what we want, once we know that we want to break things down by month and we want our metric to be revenue, we can fairly easily accomplish that. Now, I do want to highlight a couple different things going on here. The first is this legend field right here. And actually, let me choose some different options. Let me look at regions and say region and state, which is our other like big hierarchy right here. So under legend, so some visualizations will have the ability to have different colors for each group. And that's called a legend, or it might be called other things in other visualizations, but the function is the same. So if we want to break things down into different kind of color groups, I can actually just click and drag region down here to my legend. And we'll see that each region now has a different color associated with it. And if I go down to view the next level in the hierarchy, we'll see that each region again has, don't know why my text isn't quite lining up, but in any case, that these subcategories, these states, are being shown color-coded by region. So even if I took region out here, let's say I was just viewing things by state, I can still have region as my legend right here, and then that would be able to communicate, what parent group these are a part of. Now, beyond these options for, setting up our colors, we might want to go in deeper and customize what our visuals look like. And for that, we have this formatting button right here. And this will take us to all of our options for formatting our visualizations. Now, every visualization is going to have this general area. That's going to have information like, where is it on the screen? How big is it? It also will allow us to put in alt text so that we can have that alt text there for anyone using an assistive screen reader. And then from there, we can look at things like our legend. How is our legend being shown? What font size is the text for our legend? We might want it to be bigger. We can see that, we expand this out here. Now, each visual is going to have potentially different sets of options. So I'm not going to dive too deeply into this, but just know that we can get really in-depth in customizing how our visuals look and feel using this formatting option. Now I am going to, let's make this where's our tree map? Here we go, tree map. And we no longer have our legend. But here we go. We have our tree map, and we have, let's drag region down to our group and call it there. So we have this one visual, and this is kind of the process that we would have gone through if we wanted to create the visuals that we saw in that sample report. But let's look at some other things that we can do, other things that we can add. So the first is I want to come back to this filters panel right here that I collapsed earlier. So the filters panel is something where we can use this to filter out information. We can set some default filters that are applied whether or not any users change what is being filtered. We can also add criteria that users can filter based on as well right here. So I want to show, so first we have this eye icon. this determines whether the filters panel is visible to our end users. So if I click on this, it's not going to be visible to my end users. And if I unclick this, it is going to be visible to the end users. Then I need to be able to choose what is being what people can filter by. For example, I might want people to be able to filter by what state we were looking at. I might want people to be able to filter by my product, see product code right here. And we'll see that, for each of these, we get these areas where we can go and filter out and select various things to view in our report. Now, I'll note that there's a little lock icon. So if we don't want the end user to be able to change these filters, if we are have some default filters applied that we don't want people to be able to change, we can hit that lock. If we want people to not be able to see that this filter is being applied at all, we can hit the little eye icon to see whether or not it's shown. And I want to take a look at what this looks like from our reading view. So anytime when we're authoring a report, we can go into reading view. Now in reading view, we are essentially only going to be able to see this central canvas above the dotted line. So all these other tools that we have right here will go away. But this will simulate what our, oh, actually, before I go into reading view, I do need to save my document or save my report. We'll hit save as and call it a demo report. Oh, and then once I save as, it is going to go to my reading view anyway. But we'll see here. So this is my reading view. We can see that we have filters on this page. So this is that filters panel that I was setting up in my editing view. So as a user of the report, I can collapse this and expand this as I need to. But this is just a handy way to give people options to filter data so that they can get a more precise view of things. Another option that we have, if I go back into my edit view, is rather than setting up filters over here, we can set up a slicer like we saw in that sample report. So a slicer is this icon right here. So if we want to add a slicer based on, let's say, again, our product code, just like we had in that sample report, if I click product code right here and click and drag it up here, we will see that if I change the visual type to be a slicer, I get this visual right here. I do want to note that with this visual, you'll see that I have some more options up here in the top. Actually, wait, is it more options or is it? No, here, sorry. We got a little drop down here in the top right-hand corner, and I can choose whether or not this is shown as a list or as a drop-down menu. Now, the one that we saw in our sample report is a drop-down menu. That generally, depending on what you're doing, that may be preferred just so it doesn't take up too much screen space. But if I have it set to be a drop-down menu, I can click on any of these, and I can navigate through this and apply filters as needed. One thing I do want to note, because we often do want to be able to filter things and we want to be able to set those up for our end users, is that if I go into my formatting options for my slicer, there is this option for selection controls. So we can force things to only select a single item. If we are not, we can choose to have that behavior where in order to select multiple things, we need to left click and hold control. If we don't select that, we'll see that rather than needing to control and left click, I can just click on multiple items and display those as needed. I can also choose whether or not a select all button is shown. So I can choose to select all or deselect all like this. So those are the two ways that we can provide access to kind of filtering for our end user, on top of their being able to use things like drill down in a hierarchy or to select and highlight various areas. The other option I want to show is that up here in our up here in the toolbar, we have the option to add in some additional things. So we can add a text box like this. If we need to put a title on things, we can add images. We can add buttons that allow us to navigate back and forth between pages if we have multiple set up. And finally, remember that Q&A that we saw earlier where we had the option to kind of ask Power BI questions and have it display things for us? We can add that into our report by clicking Q&A right here. Wait. And we can choose to, where do I choose how this gets displayed? I want it to just be that small little icon. In any case, we can add that Q&A feature right here so that people can ask questions about their data. And with that, we have about 2 minutes left. I do want to turn things over to questions again, if we have any.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for an amazing Power BI session. Once again, if you'd like to come off mute for the last couple remaining minutes, now is your time to ask Nick some questions. And with no remaining questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop that recording.